Susan, it's good to see you.
Hi, Sam. It's great to see you. Too bad the congregations, I'm just going to imagine them all out there in the airwaves.
Yes. Oh, and thanks for being the first of Mountain Vista's ministers to kind of come back and be with us.
Oh, thank you. It's really nice to be asked. Really great to be back.
Mm-hmm. How are you? How have you been since leaving Mountain Vista?
Been real good. It's been it's almost 10, no, it's 12 years now, huh? Yeah, about 12 years. And I've been doing some interim ministries and getting my book finished that I wanted to do and starting the second one, but I haven't accomplished all the publishing yet. And I've done an interim in Flagstaff and Claremont, California. And so that's been really good. I'm just bebopping around. Right now we're in a trailer because we sold our house in Tucson about 6 months ago. And Curtis and I, we're still together, and we're as good as anybody else. I can say that,
Yeah, I know you and I talked a little bit yesterday, and we're kind of honest with each other just about how hard this has been.
Yeah, I was telling you that, losing my parents a few years ago, one after the other, that natural deaths, but it's still, it just never occurred to me. It really didn't occur to me that, living with my parents for so long, as part of my family, my love, my life, and that even though they're very old and dying at the right time, so to speak, it was very hard for me to, I don't know, just much harder than I thought to see them pass. So I've been grieving. And then right after my mom's memorial was when COVID started, like right after that. So there's unfinished business with that. And of course, I can't stand the politics, but I probably shouldn't talk about that here. It has been a hot iron in my heart, I should say. It's been really, really hard to see how it divides our family and other families and society. And I know today we're recording this on January 6th, which is the, anniversary of the insurrection. Something I would never, ever, ever in my wildest dreams have imagined such a thing to happen. It's very frightening, and I know it's frightening for everybody. Of course, I never imagined that a COVID, COVID would happen. So, but Curtis and I sold our house. We had lived in Tucson for about 3 years, and some of you in the congregation did see us, and Curtis joined the the Finding Heart care groups, which he loved. But then in June, we decided to take advantage of the huge price that the houses were, and we sold our house. We bought an RV, and we went back east all the way to almost to Boston. We did a genealogy trip with my sister, and then we both got COVID, and so then we had to come home. We're both vaccinated, and we had breakthrough COVID. So it's been part of we've just been trying to heal. Curtis has long COVID, which means the cough has lasted even to today. So it's been about 5 months of that. But, we try to take care of our relatives and not expose them to anything, wear our mask, and be as clean as we can be. And so it's been hard to see, the congregation, right when you got that building, what a wonderful thing, and then not be able to use it. It's been really rough for you guys, I know, and for me, I know you're I'm just so grateful that you're there and you know how to do all this high-techy stuff. So, which
Yeah.
I don't know how you did it. I just don't. But
Mhm.
I have huge kudos to you for being able to set it up with everybody there, Mountain Vista, and
Mhm.
continue a ministry of meaning here in Tucson. So,
Mm. Yeah, I'm glad you brought up just the COVID path because this is my first ministry
mhm,
here. And you and I mentioned yesterday that it's hard to be a minister when you're feeling pain or
mm,
grief.
yeah,
And just I know I've been navigating that as a new minister in the last couple years of how do you how do you minister when you're in pain? I don't
yeah.
know what your wisdom is on that.
Well, like with us, well, you know what was my saving grace, and they teach you this in seminary too, how important it is to have your group, have your ministers that you can go and be with. My
Mhm.
dad did that, and he was one of the um, he seated a lot of congregations in Arizona, but it was always very important to have a ministers group to
Mm.
help each other give support. And I was part of that in my early part of my ministry and continued that on um, here in Tucson. So, meeting once a month with the ministers was my salvation in many ways because you learn from each other and you cry there and you
Mhm.
laugh with them and at the same time you learn to be honest in preaching and in worship, not try not to cry too much when you're grieving, but everybody has that pain they deal with. So how you model it is important. Some people can handle tears, others can't, but it's all part of life.
Mhm. Yeah, I was really enjoying your telling me about your family lineage.
Hmm.
And I don't know, it sounds like your lineage's approach to generous ministry. And I don't know if everyone at Mountain Vista knows that lineage. And would you be willing to share it?
Sure, sure. I was just reflecting yesterday on how I can tell you the story. What this I was at the Phoenix church just a few years ago because Curtis and I joined that church and joined the choir before my parents died. And Susan Frederick Gray was the minister, and she's just awesome. Benji Messer's the choir director. We just love being there. And so at one point, one of the members of the congregation who was doing some kind of research study about the growth of the church over the years came up to me and said, Susan, your dad, for some reason, didn't grow the congregation. These statistics show that it's been stable, pretty much around 400 for all the years of his ministry. He was there 27 years. And they said, what's that about? How come it never grew? And maybe he didn't know how to grow a congregation, because that was like my passion, was growing congregations. And then I said, but you're forgetting that in those days we didn't keep all the members to ourselves. When people who lived in Tempe and were coming up to Phoenix, they said, help us form a group down in Tempe. And Dad did. He would go there after church on Sunday. Same with Sun City when people wanted something there. Same with Flagstaff, same with Prescott. Tucson was already established with David Johnson, and Dad and David were, supporting each other in their ministries. But you don't just keep everybody to yourself. So that is growth when you spin out other congregations, and maybe even the more important growth, because both those congregations also are well grounded over. Takes time. It takes a lot of time, but and then my dad, his father was started the church in El Paso when Dad was young, or teenager or whatever, and he was part of that. And my grandfather, Charlie Manker, he would, after church, he and his wife, my grandmother, would drive to Albuquerque to help that little fledgling group get going. And Las Cruces, I remember the name of the other town, and maybe Santa Fe, I don't know. But that's what you did. And that itinerant ministry, passionate, spreading, we say spread the gospel, but then they wouldn't have said that because saying gospel was like a bad word. Now we can say it again. Grown a lot, but anyway, I just wanted to share that sometimes people just see one thing, like whatever they missed, like with our congregation, Mountain Vista. When we had the architects there about 15 years ago or whatever, and they gave a presentation. We were going to expand the building, and they came in, they said, the property's for sale next door. They told us that. And they said, you should buy it. Follow our advice. You should buy it. So we did. And we let our dream of the expanding and building that building go. But people will still come up to me and say, how come we didn't buy that other building? How come we didn't do that? They just forget the story. And so then the story gets lost, especially when people don't remember it when they're writing histories. It's a lot of history that gets just focused on whoever writes it, as you know. But anyway, that was what we were talking about.
Yeah. I kind of loved this image of what your grandfather, your father, and you triple preaching on a Sunday.
Yeah.
Just imagine, imagining the overflow, that it was worth it to the movement to do something more than just for your own congregation, that you were actually growing a movement, not just a congregation.
Right. And that's what we talked about a lot in ministry, especially since I was trained as an extension minister, and Northwest Tucson, which we were called at the time, entered that extension ministry program so that they had monetary support and training support to grow when we were small. That was 1996 when I came to what's now Mountain Vista. But we talked about the fact that we ministered to a congregation, but we ministered to everybody. We ministered to the city, to our colleagues, to the state, to the United States, to the world. If we have a broader view of what we're saying, and now that everything's online, this sermon could spark, fires in somebody in Japan who said, oh gosh, I didn't know there was such a thing. And that actually happened to me one time. I preached a Christmas sermon about atheism, and no, it wasn't about atheism. It was the one about embracing the holiday and letting go of your angst about the words. Just relax and enjoy the carols the way they are, and the stories and all of that, and how to embrace that, especially when logically it doesn't make sense to us anymore. And somebody came to church a month later, and they said they'd come up from Mexico, and they'd heard that sermon online. And that was their first experience of Unitarian Universalism. And since then, they'd been to the website of the UUA and decided that our church was what they wanted. So we aren't just like in a bubble. And sometimes people forget that they think we are, that we're dedicating a building. You're going to dedicate a wonderful new building. I think it's awesome. And, it's not just for the people who are already there. It's for so many people who are yearning for what our faith has to teach. Yeah.
I'm laughing too, because you mentioned that someone saw a recording of you. Were you all putting recordings up online when you were a minister? Did you see what was coming?
I think that it wasn't. I think you're right. At that time, it wasn't it wasn't a video. It was my was it my secretary? And I'm forgetting her name. The woman who would always put up the sermons, like written form, post them, and then these people saw them somehow. I guess they were searching for maybe a keyword, which I thought was just fascinating, because going through the the years of no internet and no ability to do that. And then you could come into where you could do a key search, keyword search, I'm trying to say, and find a zillion, gazillion things that you didn't know were there. It's a very different world now for ministry and for people who want to connect. So.
Yeah. Yeah. How on earth did you stay in a 14-year ministry?
Oh yeah, we talked about this yesterday too. Well, and I tell this to people, I've mentored a lot of ministers, and I tell them all the time that if you can get a congregation who is open enough to teach you, and you are open enough to teach them, that's how you create a ministry that's together, that works. And I think here they were wanting to grow. They wanted growing. They wanted me to work with them on what kinds of things is the UUA, and everybody saying grows a congregation. And boy, would they, latch onto those things. And we created committees for that. And it's really fun. It's fun to reach out to people and do that. And things like, I was telling you about when I used to preach from books, and I'd have a big stack of books by the pulpit. And one Sunday, Ron Meikle, who's still around, and he pulls me, he says, "I want to talk to you in the parking lot." And I say, "Okay." So I go out to the parking lot, and he says, "Susan, we really don't want a book report." And I said, "What? You don't? You don't?" He said, "We want to know what you think. We want to hear what you have to say." And as a young minister, it's like, I've been in the ministry over 10 years by then, but I still thought that I had to have a lot of backup for anything I wanted to say. He said, no, we just want to hear what's in your heart and what you have to say. And that was so freeing. It was really freeing. And I was so grateful that he did that. And that's how congregants who are brave enough and grounded enough will actually shape your ministry just as you're trying to shape them. It's a two-way street. And yes, there was conflict, definitely conflict. But those were about other things that I just don't feel like going into at the moment. But the pain of that conflict still lives with me right now. And I don't think of it as a mistake, because it wasn't a mistake. It's just what it was. Difference of opinion about ministry and who's in charge, and following through and making promises and breaking promises, that kind of thing. And I didn't I wasn't going to raise it out, that conflict in the early 2000s. That conflict I was not going to bring public at all, except that at least I think it was like 8 people had written me or called me or told me, even staff, colleagues, people on the board. They said, "This is happening in your congregation and you need to confront it," because I was on sabbatical. So I thought, okay. But I was going to leave because, you don't want to split a congregation. I never want to split a congregation with conflict. But people said, "We can handle this and just bring it out." And we did. And it was painful for a lot of people, and a lot of people left the congregation then. Well, not a lot, but some. And so the pain stays. And I didn't know it. Well, I did know it at the time, because it happened in my dad's congregation at one point, in his ministry when he was away on sabbatical. And I've worked in good offices at the UUA, for UUMA. That's where you're the minister to the ministers. You're there to consult with them and help all the good local good offices work on conflict. And it happens almost every congregation. So it's not a new thing. You've frozen, or have we? Oh yeah, you came back. There you go. When we record and you freeze, is that prompt? Should I stop?
Maybe, but yeah, give it a minute and then stop if it's still there. Mhm.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. What you've been through a lot of ministries now. What's your wisdom for for congregations that are at a ministerial transition and kind of the conflict that kind of comes up in the moment of a transition?
Uh, well, I will say it's so much easier to be an interim than it is. Like you can just say it, you've learned enough over the years, and the interim training is awesome, which you've gotten, I'm sure.
Mhm.
And I actually went through it twice just because, well, that's another story. But it's being able to, I mean, when you're an interim, you work under the board, so it's not the same thing as being called by the congregation. So a it's a power difference that actually can be meaningful for the kind of change you do in an interim. When you're a called minister, you're stepping more gently with how to make change and how to hear what's going on and what people are yearning for, and what are the barriers to that. Um, who's who are the doorkeepers, so to speak? The ones that are keeping people out or filtering who can come in. Want to make sure your doorkeepers are the welcoming kind, not the ones who will make a comment to somebody they don't think should be there, which happens and you don't even know it's going on. You just have no idea. And these doorkeepers can be in groups, they can be in the board, they can be, they can create their own little group, like the humanist group that created themselves in Claremont. And they gave me the list even as an interim. We were joking about the list. If you get a list, I got the list when I went to be in Flagstaff, big long list of things I'd done wrong. That's not how you change. I didn't know about the list because Northwest Tucson, you guys had just always treated me better. And I had said, this is how you train me. You don't like harbor things. Come and tell me things and tell me when I'm doing good. I said to them as I grew into ministry, I can't handle a lot of negatives. So you have to tell me you are actually seeing what I'm doing right. And then you start with that first. And I know they've like institutionalized this now, but back when I started in 96, that was like a new thing, please give me positives first, then tell me what you want me to change. So I didn't know what a list was until I went to Flagstaff, and then they gave, surprised me with the 20 item list. It just blew me away. It's just like, it felt like a betrayal, actually. And I didn't bring it out publicly as I should have. And I just got hurt. I let myself be hurt and went away. Apparently they have a history of doing that. Then I went to Claremont 2 years later as an interim, and a small group, the humanist group, who was feeling threatened by the diversity of not of just racial diversity, but religious diversity that was blooming in that congregation. It was so wonderful for me to see. We'd even, do some Spanish stuff. It was really cool. But they gave me a list one time, sort of in the secret in the back room, of things that they thought I was doing wrong. One of which was saying God too much. But I knew now about what the list was. And so I brought it to the congregation in a service. And I said, these are things that we don't want to give in a back room. We don't want to think that criticize your new minister is going to be coming, because that was an interim. They were welcoming a new minister. And I said, these things need to be said in the service, dealt with openly. And I took a chance because I was interim. I could take a chance. I was not settled. and I could speak truth in a way that I'd never really felt I could when I was young in my ministry and as a settled minister. So I'm a hell of a lot braver now. And whoever you call, I don't know what their background is, but the congregation would do well, I think, to learn to speak about change with kindness and not embrace criticism as a modus operandi, which some people really have over the years have said, well, it's important that we criticize. Well, that might be true for, say, literary works you criticize, or science and all of that. But in ministry, you just have to start with keeping the whole heart of the congregation's ministry, which includes the minister and the members, in mind when you make change. You have to say, I see the good that you're trying to do, all of you. And this is something I think we need to do. And it's really easy for some people to do and extremely difficult for others. So that's where personalities come in.
Mhm.
But that's the advice I would give. Just kindness as you create your ministry together.
Mhm. Mhm. I feel like you've hinted at the theme for this service, which is what the hell is open-hearted engagement?
Exactly.
What is
Well,
that?
I
What do
think at Mountain Vista, it was Northwest Tucson, but Mountain Vista, we actually changed the name right before I left. But that's what we were doing with the Finding Heart groups, and the, people were doing, what does they call it in the UUA? They have a different name for them, those groups. Small group ministries. They really focused them around topic and theme. And we in our congregation said, where's the heart? And what's the tie to worship? And so that's why we created a different program at Northwest Tucson, which is Mountain Vista. Which I see you kept one part of that word, but
the heart.
the heart part, exactly.
Yeah.
And everything is about honoring what needs to change. So you've brought change from Ron brought change from Joy's interim, Joy brought change from my interim, my settled ministry, and the next minister will bring change and challenge, but you want to keep the heart there. Always remember that, and always remember that minister is going to a new place, probably if they're not coming from somewhere else, just starting out in a new role is very, very difficult, very, very challenging, but very rewarding.
You're frozen. I'm gonna wait till there you are.
Okay.
As we've been doing research, the search team was researching and thinking about Mountain Vista's DNA, kind of what's in the DNA of the congregation. It seems like small group ministry is in the DNA of the congregation. I wonder if
That's very cool. Yeah. Well, and that's essential really to, as we learned over the years, to any congregation's growth, because when you get bigger, people want that intimacy. And if you're too big, they just they don't feel that. And so that's what large congregations have learned over the years. You have to do small group ministries of various kinds where people can connect and explore together. So it's not just around doing the duties of a congregation, and that's also where you get a lot of pastoral care support, so that the pastoral care teams and ministers don't have to do everything. And you also find out a lot from people in those groups. They say, gosh, somebody's really hurting, and am I doing right by doing this? And you say, oh, yes, thank you. Yes. As you grow, ministers don't have to do everything. So that's the other thing about congregational growth. You have to train and honor the ministry of the laity. which is always there anyway, but whether anybody recognizes it or not. So
Mhm. Mhm. Hmm.
have you felt supported by that in the congregation?
Oh, yeah. I've marveled at our caring heart circles, which it is a fun little lineage from your ministry of finding heart circles.
Yeah.
Um, that those began at the beginning of COVID as a way for people to feel connected. And also when we didn't know what would happen with COVID, um, they were roughly geographical so that people could deliver groceries or drop off medicine or check in on each other. And
Mhm.
then they kept going and kept going and kept going. And I have no hand in them.
Right.
It's the greatest testimony to lay leadership because it's the one thing I touch and it's one of our most successful things. New members and visitors and people just find their own intimacy and then cultivate it. Um,
Mhm.
and I've really marveled at that, how little of a role I have in the well-being of those circles. Mhm. Yeah.
And that is you know something that um people will keep going. So
Mhm.
I think and if the new minister doesn't have any experience with it, it would be a point of teaching between them,
Mhm.
you know,
Mhm.
people saying, well, this is why this is important to us, and why are why are you reticent, or what are you worried about, or that kind of thing. One
Mhm.
worry that I think ministers always have is, how can I serve all these people? How can I be there for all of them in the way that I want? One time I was having a walk with Tom Owentoll, who was my mentor in ministry. He was in the San Diego church for many, many years. So this was long ago, like 30 years ago or something. And I said to him something like, how do you, because it was a big congregation, I said, how do you serve them all? How do you do their pastoral care and all of that? And he said, you don't. That's all. He said, and you love them, that they just want to be loved. So that's been my main, you know,
Mhm. Yeah.
main
I'm intrigued. I didn't realize that one of your primary ministry roles with Mountain Vista at the time was around growth. And
thing.
it's kind of interesting to me because I feel like they're now at a place where they want to do another push to grow.
Mhm.
And what's the wisdom from then that might speak to where they are now with their next minister?
What we've learned, and I also learned this in Claremont, because they were being actually tried to be bought by the mall next door to them, wanted to buy their property and get them to be part of this big plan of a planned community with a church in it. So being part of all that, that's one thing I think I didn't do well at the church, was I didn't connect with um, the architects in a personal way, and I let a group do that. But that's like, how do I do everything? I don't. And that was one thing I decided was in good hands. But I think people on that architecture committee felt like I should have um, been more present with them, with the architects. I was for some time, but and um, anytime you start a capital campaign, you have conflict, because you have people who are giving to the ministry of the congregation, the whole thing, whole ministry, the beingness, the services, the RE, everything, social justice. You add another piece, the capital campaign, and then people are like scared. They're like, the first thing you have to teach is that it's two different pockets. That the church money, the money you give to the lifeblood of your congregation, is out of one pocket. Capital campaign money is almost always out of another pocket. People find the money. Most people find the money some people are too worried about their money to stay in that kind of environment where you're asking for money. So they will often complain a lot or leave or feel like nobody's meeting their needs. So that's one conflict. And, we actually kept, when we did the capital campaign, I think it was '06 or '07 or '08 or something like that, we raised as much as our operating budget already was. So we proved the point that it was two different pockets. But sometimes people don't see that, but most people do. What's the other thing you wanted to know about that?
Growth. How do people know they want to grow, and what should they be looking at in the next year if growth is a goal of theirs?
Well, there's a lot of growth. I can't think of the word. It's like lessons, but it's not lessons.
Yeah, there's like books and
Yeah,
webinars.
Yeah. And they say it doesn't matter what size your congregation is. You can be 4,000 members. People will still, when you confront them with growing the congregation, they say, but we'll lose the intimacy we have. And there are 4,000 members. And we're, 40 member little fellowship. People will still, some people, there's always some people, it's not everybody at all, ever, just will say, they're afraid of losing intimacy somehow, or things being different, or the strangers coming in. And even though a lot of us help them to embrace the ministry of, getting to know the strangers who come in the door there, I would always tell people every Sunday, the people who come in the door on Sunday, the strangers, are really have overcome their own fear of us and who we are, to be in a new community that might help them, might be where they feel safe and loved in whatever is going on in their lives. And our ministry, our big ministry, is to find out what that is and be there with them. And so it's like teaching people how to minister to those who come in the door. Very rarely were people coming in the door and they were like joyfully just there for no reason at all. They were there because they were like, what is this place? Will you meet my needs? I've been, religiously, spiritually abused in the past, and just really searching. And can somebody hear me? Can somebody be with me? I just lost one man one Sunday. He said that he met me at the door when I was leaving, greeting, and he said, it's the first time I've been able to come back to church since my wife died 4 years ago. I couldn't walk through the door. And he said he was just so glad that he felt love from us rather than, a place that was difficult. So people are going through a lot. And so growing means that we embrace our ministry to one another. We open those circles up. We have our own little circle that feeds us, but we have a larger circle and challenge to feed the world, to feed the other people who are yearning for being with us. Mm-hmm. So that's a hard thing to talk about with some people. Other people, they're just like, of course. Of course.
Yeah. Is there anything that you know about your ministry at Mountain Vista now that you didn't know then? Something that's become clear now?
Oh, about my ministry there? Mm-hmm. I think in the last actually few weeks of learning that anxiety might run in my family, that I was shyer than probably people want me to be. It's one thing when you go up and it's a role when you're a minister. And I always struggled whenever I would be in the congregation for like any kind of meeting, board meeting, congregational meeting. I would shiver and shake to sit in the congregation if I had to stand up and say something, or if people would point me out. And I learned that that's called anxiety, but in my day it was just called I'm nervous or I feel uncomfortable or I'm insecure. But I guess it's called anxiety. But I don't, it is what it is. And I've reflected on it over the years, but it probably shaped my choices and how much I don't know, engage with certain things, I guess.
Mhm. Mhm.
But we can't be everything to everybody, and so we pick and choose, and we just are so grateful for the lay ministry that goes on, people who can do what we can't do, and who honor that as a
Mhm.
ministry, and they don't lay it on our backs as ministers that we didn't somehow. They're just doing it because we couldn't. But think of it as, big pie. We're all part of that pie. We're all pieces of that pie. So
Mhm. Last question. Um, what's your recommendation for saying goodbye to one minister and saying hello to the next one?
do it well. At the UUA always said do your goodbyes very well. And part of that is as the interim, and they taught me this too, of course. They said you can't say goodbye, you can't just walk away. You have to like prepare for it. And for long ministry, you can do it a whole year ahead. And even though I'm kind of shy that way, it's hugely embarrassing. Oh my God. It is. It's really embarrassing. And at the same time, people need to do that. And so it's kind of like it's just something you have to do, and let people say goodbye to you and love you. And then for the next minister to know that the welcoming of them is just as important too. To say what, with your goodbye, to say what you did well, and which is a lot. I can just see you from my far roost, far away, how well you've done, and a real gift to the congregation. In just from my perspective, there's always conflict. You know that, always, always, always conflict. And the new minister, for them to say, what they hope, and for the new minister to be able to engage with that, the gratitude, basing everything from a place of loving one another. It's good to start there.
Mhm. Is there anything you would want the next minister to know about Mountain Vista?
I honestly, after 12 years of being gone, there's, it's a totally different place. There's seeds, like you said, things that stayed, and successful, the small group ministries being successful. There's the elders who who are still honored, who are still there, which is wonderful in any congregation. When you have the elders stay on, that shows there's rootedness that's very important to keep. But there's a lot of people I don't know, and the whole personality of the congregation it shifts and changes with every ministry. So I'm excited for the new minister, and I wish them well. I'm very happy that this is another change that's happening, and not only that, but with hopefully a building that we'll get into someday. Someday.
Someday.
Someday we won't have to wear masks in church, right?
Someday.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you want to say that you haven't said?
I don't think so. This has been very nice, very loving to be able to do this. So thank you. Thank you for inviting me into the congregation, into your worship, into your lives this way again. So I wish you all very, very much love and hope in the years to come.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you. Oh no.
It happens all the time.